George Whalley was an exceptionally accomplished man, a scholar, a poet, translator, biographer, naval officer, secret agent, scriptwriter for CBC Radio, a gifted amateur musician. People who knew Whalley called him a Renaissance man. Everything he did well. I'm Michael DiSanto. I'm an associate professor in the Department of English at Algoma University. For many years, I studied the novels of Joseph Conrad. I was interested in the ways in which he was rewriting the works of his predecessors in his art. I've spent much time reading and teaching the literature and philosophy of the long 19th century, from the French Revolution to the First World War. When I was an undergraduate student at Brock University, I studied with a professor named Dr. Brian Crick. In 1985, Brian and a professor from McMaster University named John Ferns published a selection of Whalley's essays. When I was in third year, Brian gave me a copy of that book. When I read it at that time, I didn't really grasp Whalley's arguments about language and literature and the humanities. After I left Brock, I went to Dalhousie and I studied with Dr. John Baxter. John edited Whalley's translation of Aristotle's Poetics. When I studied with him, he rekindled in me an interest in Whalley. The website is something I've done with Robin Izzard, the systems librarian here in the Wishart Library at Algoma University. Through the website, we are publishing a selection of Whalley's essays and poetry. We have published approximately 30 audio recordings of Whalley reading his poems, of him reading poems by other people, for instance, Donne and Hopkins and Yeats. We have an interview of Whalley speaking with Elizabeth Hay, the Giller Prize-winning novelist. People who knew Whalley were deeply impressed by his voice, and we wanted those who don't know him to have an experience of hearing his voice and experiencing that part of his person. We've published photos from the family, a timeline of his life, a comprehensive bibliography, and a documentary. Behind the public side of the website is a database into which we're gathering Whalley's writings and letters from public archives and private collections, most importantly Queen's University archives and the Whalley estate. The students working with me here are editing digital images of the original papers and transcribing them and making records to put into the database. We're hoping to gather all of Whalley's writings in one place for future scholars and readers to explore. When I first met the Whalley family in 2009 to 2010, the widow, Elizabeth Whalley, and her children, Catherine, Christopher, and Emily, emphasized very much the importance of gathering together George's poetry. I decided to make that my first task in my study of George Whalley. The Complete Poems collects for the first time all of Whalley's poetry. In his lifetime, he published two books, Poems 1939 to 1944 and No Man an Island. They both appeared just after the Second World War. Other poems were published in scattered periodicals and books. In the Queen's University archives and in the Whalley estate papers, I discovered approximately 150 poems previously unpublished. Over the last 10 years, I've edited 3 collections of essays. Coming to edit a collection of poetry was difficult. It was a different experience. I was confronted with a mass of manuscripts and typescripts for these unpublished poems, and I was having to organize them and understand them in a way to identify what Whalley's intentions were in writing these poems and what the final copy should be to appear in the book. For the published works, it was a little less difficult. I could work from a text from someone else's edition. But those unpublished poems, it was a bit of detective work, I felt like I was exploring and having to discover what this man was thinking, what was important to him, and what final result he was trying to arrive at through the process of writing a poem. When I came to assemble the book, I decided to put the poems together chronologically, and that will allow readers to trace the development of Whalley's style of writing over those 50 years. Many of his poems, about half, are written about the Second World War. During his time at war, he was a naval officer and a secret agent. He writes often about his experiences on board destroyers. He was involved in the pursuit and the sinking of the Bismarck, one of the major engagements of the Second World War in the Atlantic Ocean. He writes about rescuing survivors from bombed buildings in London and secret missions that he undertook to the European coast. He writes about what he saw in Sicily and Normandy and his experience of seeing what war does to a place and to a people. He also writes about falling in love during war. He met his wife Elizabeth and they married in 1944 in London. It's quite a remarkable range of poetry that he's produced. People who are interested in George Whalley can visit the website at georgewhalley.ca. The book is available through the McGill Queen's University Press website and any online retailer. My next work on Whalley will be a new collection of his essays. I think it's important for people now to have the chance to read his arguments about language and literature and the importance of the humanities in the modern world. Especially now when the humanities are being devalued, it's important for us to read those who understand the importance of reading and studying literature and seeing its place in our lives. After the collection of essays, I'm going to write Whalley's biography, and following that biography, I'm going to publish a selection of his wartime correspondence.